First, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty for all. Do we have any election board comments? Okay, then we will move on to public comments on items appearing on the agenda. You have anything, Kelly?
And at this point, no one has their hand raised online.
So
We
then we'll
can-
move on to general public comment.
Yeah.
Nobody has their hand raised, so we're just gonna keep moving. Then, all right, next agenda item is motion to canvass ballots from sequestered drop boxes. Mr. Marlette.
Good morning, members of the board. In 2020, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that secure drop boxes were legal for counties to use for the return of mail-in and absentee ballots. The Pennsylvania Department of State issued guidance that that the ballot boxes be secured and monitored by video surveillance at all times they were open for use. Montgomery established 12 drop box locations throughout the county following the court decision and has followed the DOS guidance in the operation of these boxes for all elections. The decision was made prior to this election to staff our drop box locations throughout the county. The purpose of this was to properly educate voters as to the rules of use and to make sure the voters were properly completing the declaration on the outer envelope when returning ballots to our boxes. Where boxes had previously been available for 24 hours, the hours on the boxes were limited to the times of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they were made available for this election beginning on October 29th and were open every day through Election Day. While the boxes were open, they were staffed by temporary county employees. These members of our voter education staff wore bright colored vests indicating that they were employees of the county. And as a voter approached the box, the employees asked the voter if they were depositing just one ballot, if it was their own, and if they had signed and dated the declaration and sealed their ballot in the secrecy envelope before placing it in the outer envelope. If the voter answered yes to those questions, they were given access to the drop slot and could deposit their ballot. If the voter answered no, the staff were there to assist them in the proper steps to make sure they were following the correct procedures. For those depositing multiple ballots, they were first asked if they had the proper designated agent paperwork to deposit those ballots. Pennsylvania law permits a person who is disabled, as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, to designate an agent to return their ballot on their behalf. And if the person replied in the affirmative and displayed the designated agent paperwork, the voter was permitted to deposit any additional ballots they had correct paperwork for along with that paperwork. If they replied in the negative, staff informed them that it was not permissible to deliver another person's ballot and would tell them they could not deposit the extra ballot. If a voter was insistent that they be permitted to deposit multiple ballots, the extra ballots to be deposited were stamped by the staff and the voter was permitted to deposit them. And upon return to the mail-in ballot canvass facility, those ballots were properly identified and segregated from the other ballots in the box, not to be counted. Those ballots are also being referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation. In the 2022 general election, we segregated 6 ballots via that process. In a handful of rare instances, voters approached the box in a manner that did not permit our voter education staff to properly interact with them prior to depositing a ballot. In those cases, a voter was inadvertently permitted to deposit more than one ballot. Over the course of 10 days and 12 boxes, this occurred 6 times. Upon each occurrence, the voter education staff on site immediately contacted our Director of Voter Services and filed a report describing what had occurred. Our staff then flagged those boxes, and upon their return to the mail-in canvassing facility, the ballots from each of those boxes were segregated from the rest of the return mail-in ballots, and they have been held pending a decision by this board. The details of each box that we segregated are as follows, and I'm going to provide information from the reports that were given by staff on site. On October 29th, the box at Skippack Township was reported to have allowed 1 additional ballot to be returned. Upon receipt of the box, at the end of the day, it contained 261 total ballots. In this particular instance, the staff member on site reported that they mistakenly permitted the voter to deliver a ballot for her disabled husband without the proper designated agent paperwork. On October 29th, the box located in Cheltenham was reported to have allowed one additional ballot to be deposited by a woman who was able to access the box and deposit ballots before staff had the ability to inform her that she could not deposit more than one ballot. On October 31st, the box located at Willow Grove was reported to have allowed a man to deposit his own ballot along with the ballot of his wife, who staff reported was waiting in the car nearby. In this instance, the staff were not aware that the man was depositing two ballots until he was depositing them in the chute. On November 3rd, in Royersford, a man was reported depositing two ballots into the box by staff after he ignored their repeated attempts to provide proper guidance on return procedures. On November 5th, in Skipack, an elderly man approached the box, would not engage with staff, and deposited two ballots before they could inform him of the proper procedures. It is reported that his wife was present at the site, but was in the car at the time. And on November 6th in Royersford, a voter was seen depositing what the staff estimated to be 3 or 4 ballots into the box before staff could inform him of proper procedures. All of these incidents, the reports from staff and the times that they occurred, have been referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation. Across 10 days of deposits, there were only reported, these were the only reported incidents from our voter education staff. For these 6 boxes, we have a total of 1,275 ballots that are currently segregated and awaiting a decision from the board as to their inclusion in the total count for the election. Of those 1,275, the incident reports indicate that approximately 6 to 9 ballots were deposited without the proper paperwork to do so. We are not at this time able to differentiate the improperly delivered ballots from the other 1,200 plus that we have in these boxes. The choice before the board now is whether to allow a small number of improperly delivered ballots to be counted along with over 1,200 valid ballots, or to disenfranchise those voters for the purpose of preventing these unidentifiable ballots from the final tally of the election. As this board has been counseled previously, the longstanding standard under Pennsylvania law is that the election code should be interpreted liberally in favor of the right to vote. And in a similar situation to the one we have here, the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court considered an instance in Allegheny County where multiple ballots were accepted by the Board of Elections. And in those ballots, there were a small number of ballots that they should not have accepted. And the board in that case voted to not count any of the ballots as opposed to including ballots that were validly delivered with the small number of ballots that were not delivered correctly that they could not identify. The Commonwealth Court in this case held that it's more important to protect the interest of the voters by not disenfranchising them than to adhere to strict language of the statute. And in review of that decision, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court noted their reservations concerning the decisions of the local county board to void those valid ballots because they were commingled with invalid ones, but it declined to rule on those ballots specifically based on the scope of their review of the lower court decision. In this case, we have a slightly higher number of invalid ballots, but a much larger number of valid ballots than what the courts considered in the Allegheny County case. In light of the existing case law and the large number of voters that would be disenfranchised by invalidating all of these sequestered ballots, it's my recommendation that this board consider a motion to include all 1,275 ballots sequestered from these boxes in the count of the November 8th, 2022 election.
Thank you, Mr. Marlette. I will make a motion to include the 1,275 ballots received in the sequestered drop boxes, which include any improperly delivered ballots, into the count for the November 8th, 2022 general election. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So Mr. Marlette saying it's 6 to 9 ballots.
Correct.
That would be, I just want to say, I do want to commend our voter services staff and all the temporary workers who were out for the times that the drop boxes were open. I feel that many citizens still aren't aware that they're only to deliver their own ballot. It seems in this case that it was a spouse doing it and the spouse was there as well. I would once again encourage the General Assembly and the governor in their next term to look at this and to fix this so that this is an ongoing issue. But I am certainly not going to throw out over 1,200 votes, over 6 delivered by a spouse. So I intend to vote in favor of this motion.
Mr. Marlett, presumably these ballots would meet all the other criteria to actually be counted. For instance, they would be signed on the back.
Correct. And to the extent they haven't been reviewed for that process, they will go through the normal canvas process. So they will be evaluated to make sure that they meet every other standard as required by the Pennsylvania Election Code. And at that point, if they do, then they will be included in the count.
Well, as I have said in these meetings several times over these last months, nothing stops any voter in this county from going to a United States Postal Service mailbox and putting in as many ballots as they would like. And I would like to also thank our staff for working at these drop boxes and our temporary staff to make sure that this process met the letter of the law as absolutely best we could. And I agree that given such a very small number of ballots, I think it shows that our staff did an incredible job. Just with 6 to 9 ballots to disenfranchise well over 1,200 people is not an action that I can support. So I will also support to count these ballots.
I have 2 comments. One is we often hear how mail-in voting and drop boxes are safe, easy, and secure. And this is yet again another example that it's problematic and not always secure. So in this instance, you could possibly have, obviously, from what you heard, it'll be passed, but 1,200 voters disenfranchised because of a handful of people that are not following the law. And the root of this problem is that the election law here in Pennsylvania, and I'm also constantly saying how it needs to be reformed. And we need election reform laws passed the proper way. The election laws that we're conducting these elections under currently were not passed properly. And election cycle after election cycle, we continue to face problems. And I agree, this can occur at a mail-in ballot drop box. It could also occur at United States Postal Service mailbox. So the root of the problem is the law, and I too urge the Pennsylvania legislature to fix it. And we can't have 67 counties operating differently. And it's clear that we also need to change our procedures here in Montgomery County to limit this problem moving forward. I'd like to see it that if this ever occurs where county staff is unable to prevent a voter from putting multiple ballots into the drop box, that we immediately pause and replace that mail-in ballot drop box with a new container inside, so we don't have to sequester as many ballots moving forward. So I'm going to vote no on this because the law is clear, and my no vote is a protest no vote. So the state legislature and the next governor of Pennsylvania realizes that we must fix our election laws here in Pennsylvania. So I request a roll call vote.
I believe Ms. Washington is online.
Yes. Chair Lawrence. Vice Chair Arkush.
Aye.
Commissioner Gale.
All right, motion passes 2-1. Are there any closing board comments?
I'm sure, I don't believe we gave the public opportunity for general public comment.
Okay, there was nobody signed up.
I don't know that we asked whether or not there was any general public.
Okay, was there any general public comment, Kelly? Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we put it out there that we asked. Okay.
all right. With that, I will make a motion to adjourn the November 10th, 2022 meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Meeting is adjourned.